Greetings, fellow visitors. This is Upgrade Terminal, a Star of Providence fancast. I'm Malachi.
And I'm Nick. Welcome back to the facility. Today's episode is going to be a bit of a treat. Today, we are joined by Coolant. Once again, say hello, Coolant.
Hey.
Now, some of you who have been listening to the podcast for a while may remember Coolant as one of the two guests we had on our Wiki episode alongside Rutabaga. And Coolant has made a name for himself for being like an excellent Wiki admin, helping a lot to document a lot of things about the game. But today, we're going to talk about not quite documenting mechanics or boss fights or anything, but specifically documenting the lore and the timeline of the events of Star of Providence, something that he has put a lot of work in and has always been really interested in. And he has a treat for us today, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. I hope so.
Yeah, so back before the Into Oblivion update, there was a lore document that you had shared on the Team D13 server that I'd read. A lot of people, anyone interested in the lore, I think, has read. And now you've kind of updated it.
Yeah, no, I think with Into Oblivion out, it needed a little bit of updating.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit.
Yeah, we got a lot of juicy tidbits of story in there, and Cullen was like, time to get to work.
Yeah, it was a lot more than I anticipated, and I will still probably need to keep refining the document.
Actually, I do have a brief question for you. It's like, you are technically part of the beta testing group. Mm-hmm. I think at first it was because you are, as the main wiki admin, it was good for you to be in the know of like what's coming. But like were you like already in the beta just looking at the little bits of lore and being like, interesting?
Oh yeah. There were things that during the beta, I actually I had to be careful not to. I had to watch what I was talking about in the lore and speculation channel, because certain things would come up where I knew a little bit of something, not from Ace mostly, because that came a lot later.
Yep.
But just things with like the loop boss battles and stuff. There was some juicy stuff that I had to be careful about.
And like some things of like, well, we'll get into that. We'll get into that.
That would be. I've noticed that is really difficult. It's difficult for beta testers and the devs themselves to parse like what was pre Into Oblivion, what was post, and like it's all just sort of blended together at this point. So yeah, I can imagine that was super challenging.
Well, I think it's not that it's difficult to parse that exactly. Like part of it is like the secrecy that's required and like the long waits. Like, but I think in my head I have pretty clear what was pre and post. It gets tricky when you think of like which specific update added this one thing. Oh god, and like keeping track of all the changes. But like again, we'll whole bunch of things.
Yeah, I think as an example, I think me and I think there was at least one or two other people back when, I don't know if it was like Halloween or something, but there had been at some point we'd theorized that Loop Guy was null, and then going into the Loop bosses, like looking at some of that stuff, it like for me kind of like confirmed that, and so I didn't want to speak about like, there's stronger evidence now. So like that theory I basically just didn't touch until like the update was out, because I was like, I can't talk about this anymore. Like it's just it wouldn't be fair to talk about it. Like, so anytime it came up, I just mouth zipped.
Yeah. And the other problem is though, because it's in the beta in particular is always in a constant state of flux. So it's like all too easy to be like, well, this was here before and now it wasn't. What does that mean for the story? Did they change their minds, or like did they rewrite something? Like things like that. It's kind of hard to know. It's better to wait until like we have the official update, and then because then it becomes a collaborative thing we all can piece it together, as opposed to just a couple of beta testers with betas that may or may not be the same the next time they show up.
Yeah, and I didn't start updating the document or anything. I had some thoughts tucked away, but I didn't start updating anything until the update was actually released.
That's probably a really good thing, because otherwise you would have probably had to go back and revise stuff, and you just could play the beta without having to worry about updating lore.
Yeah, it's also like just kind of my style of analyzing stuff like this. Like I tend to not really dig into analysis until I've seen everything I can, because it feels like you could just like any piece of information could do like a heel turn on your theories.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's risky to do it with incomplete information, and then you find stuff and it completely invalidates everything you theorized.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. I'm pretty happy to just like scrap an entire theory. And I hope it doesn't seem fickle when I do that. Because sometimes on the chat, I'll just be like, I don't think this anymore. I'm just like, this is what I think now. And I think all that other stuff was wrong.
Well, that's like a good scientist does. It's like when you get new data.
Say, that's great.
Yeah. You get new data, you revise your conclusions. That's the right thing to do. It's just that people sometimes have trouble letting go of like conclusions that they thought for so long were true, or like their pet theories.
Right.
It's good to have that little bit of that willingness to be like, if new information comes, I'll just change what I think.
I'm very happy with that. Yeah.
It's very good.
Well, you've done a really great job. I just read your new updated 3-volume lore document.
It's quite lengthy.
Yes, 5,700 words, I think, at last count.
Yeah, and I mean, it's incredibly detailed. It's very cool. Today, we want you to we're going to give the floor to you and let you talk us through your interpretation of the lore. But we did want to say that up top that, this is Coolant's interpretation. This is Professor Coolant today. And, everybody can have their own interpretation, but today we're listening to yours.
There are other professors at the Academy, and I think they'll have their lectures as well.
Yes. And so our job as students of lore is to listen to each professor's lecture and then come to our own conclusions.
I like the thing is the way you say that makes it sound like, oh, now we have to invite 3 other people to the podcast so we can hear their takes on the lore.
Hey, if any lore scholars emerge, I will invite them onto the show, even if I disagree with their interpretation of the lore.
That's good. That's good podcasting.
Any other order of business before we get into the meat of it?
I don't think so. There's a lot of meat, so I kind of want to just let Coolant get going.
All right, Coolant, you have the floor.
All right. So we're starting off with stuff that's already like blasting into big spoiler territory. So if you haven't done Into Oblivion yet, the update, and I mean like everything, then it might be a good time to go do that.
Yeah, if you don't have like at least all achievements, you're probably gonna get spoiled on some stuff.
That's literally like everything in the game because of world record. Let's see. So we have a pretty big timeline, and it starts back thousands, like very likely thousands and thousands of years ago, and it spans across at least 3 different civilizations, possibly more, but we'll focus on 3 of them. And the first one were a group of people who were very technologically advanced, and they came into contact with a kind of an alien group of people, someone out there in space, who helped them to construct the gateways that we see on the gateway that we see on the facility. It's those 2 spires. And when they did that, those people came bursting through, invading, and they were masters of magic and stuff, and shared some of that information with the original constructors, but the constructors of the gateway. But they didn't tell them about time magic, which kind of caused them to the constructors to absolutely crumble under the magic of these guys. Now, where those guys came from, who I've called the scholars in this document, it seems like they had a grasp on 5 schools of magic: flame, frost, storm, earth, and sight. and they were off on some distant planet, maybe even like, galaxies away. And they they seem to have discovered the void, and we see some imagery in Trial 5 regarding this. We see them staring up at this huge, uh, circular thing in the sky that appears to be maybe the void or some interpretation of power eternal. And we see them constructing their own gateways on their planet. And so we can assume that around that time is when they reached out to the other group on the other planet and were helping them create their gateways. And I'm assuming that the reason they had to communicate this is because gateways need a point A and a point B. So they needed someone to build the other side. They could probably build it themselves, but that'd be a long way to travel to do so. So once they had tricked this other group into building a gateway, they came through and just wreaked havoc. The purpose for the invasion isn't entirely clear. It seems like a lot of the groups in this game, they're on the lookout for souls and stuff, but I don't know if that was the case in this invasion. It might have just been conquest. But once they came through and started some war that, who knows how long it lasted. I can't imagine it was super long. Seems like it was maybe brief given the amount of devastation.
Yeah.
But this kind of perked up the ears of some creatures from I don't know, another plane of existence, which is the void. And that's when the sky shattered, the Star of Providence burst through, and then destroyed the invaders and even the people that were being invaded. So it didn't cause like absolute extinction or anything, but it seems like there were probably very few survivors from the star coming through.
So you make a comment in your lore document, Coolant, that I really like, that like, so as this war was happening, like the creatures in the void kind of felt like this war going on, all the people dying, and they were attracted to it like sharks, like blood in the water. Which I thought was a really evocative way to describe that and makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the trader mentions that in his lore debrief in the hub. He mentions that I think it's just the amount of souls that were being cast about kind of attracted them, because Power Eternal is hungry for that stuff, and so that attracted them. So they came through, wreaked havoc. It seems that this area where the gateway was built was absolutely devastated. Now, we don't know how many people survived and what happened with them. It's very unclear. But we do know that it took a little while for them to kind of get things rolling again. Meanwhile, and this is kind of looking back at some of the stuff in Trial 5, it seems like it's showing us a timeline of those original mages, those invaders. And it seemed to me like, we've never seen anything else come through the gateway. And I was kind of curious why. And looking at some of the stuff in Trial 5, it seems like maybe them building the gateways and then beginning to use them may have also attracted void creatures to their home world. That's a bit unclear. The imagery is uncertain, but it would, in my opinion, kind of make sense that maybe they had some trouble at home, and that's why reinforcements didn't come like to help the invasion, or why they weren't wondering, oh, hey, I wonder how that invasion went. Maybe we should check in with them. Like, no, it just seems like, an absolute like communication cut. So it seems like things probably didn't go so well for them at home either, but we're not entirely sure. So now the area around the gateway is devastated. Maybe there are tribes of people around that, have been observing the wreckage, or, so, one thing I didn't mention is after the star blew everything up, it actually came crashing down to Earth. So the star is now on the planet.
Buried deep within the planet, perhaps?
Yeah, it seems like it's probably entrenched pretty far down.
At least 6 floors down or something.
Yeah, around 6 floors, something like that. Whatever floor means as a unit. So it's uncertain how long it was before anyone discovered it, or if the survivors knew it was there. If I were one of them, I would probably be pretty scared to go looking at this thing that just blew everybody up.
Oh yeah.
But they eventually people kind of just found it. I don't know if they dug around it or what, but
Maybe it was calling to them.
I mean, honestly, it's a very enticing presence.
Mm-hmm.
So this this is who I consider like the second civilization, I guess. The
Mm-hmm.
first one got wiped out. The second civilization now finds the star, and they seem to understand that it is special. They understand that they can draw some sort of power from it. What this manifests as, like if they are capable of creating machines and they see that they can put this stuff into it, whatever, is very unclear. We don't know what they do with it.
Mm-hmm.
But we do know that they seem to revere it very strongly. They build a temple around it. Um, so it is something that is precious to them. They begin to commit rituals and sacrifices, and I speculate that they probably learned some of its runic components as well.
So
Uh,
they becomes a sort of cult around this.
yeah, yeah. And it's unclear how like widespread this is. It's probably pretty isolated, kind of like how it seems to be isolated in the present day as well. But what we do know is that they continued to mess around with this power, and
Mm-hmm.
they tried to do something big with it, and it ended up triggering some sort of cataclysmic event, and they wiped themselves out. And this time, I don't think there were really survivors from that region.
That's 2 counts for obliteration from this.
Yeah, that hungry little star is getting as many souls as it wants at this point.
And like, I guess the question is like, uh, does the memory of the devastation just not get carried down, or does it get like conveniently forgotten in their quest for power?
Ah, yeah. Well, let's see. I think we'll get to that, but
Oh, okay, okay.
it seems like it's been forgotten. And I think at this point in the story, what's important is that I'm assuming that people are kind of forgetting about this region of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they knew someone who lived there, they just don't anymore.
Yeah,
And
it's just
maybe,
desolation, right? I mean, it's like a wasteland then.
yeah.
No reason to
And
go there.
it kind of seems like if people knew someone or something in that region, then the information about everything surrounding that gets kind of muddled.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, we'll kind of dig into that a little bit deeper later.
Okay, okay. Continue.
So then, who knows how much longer later? Probably another 1,000 years or something. Um, a new group finds these ruins,
Mm-hmm.
and something I've been wondering about for a while is whether or not the first civilization was very technologically advanced. So
Mm-hmm.
they probably had the city, like a city around the gateway that they built, and I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if that city survived and into the second generation. um, but it's unclear. And then the third generation, like when they found this, like what did they find? A hole in the ground? Did they find a temple? Um, well, I mean, I guess we know that they found.
They found an excavation. The excavation is older than
Yeah,
what's on top. So I think then it was safe to say that it was at some point destroyed. And then
yes,
because this is like the place where it all, the power, sort of the nexus of this power, that's why they built on top of it again.
yes,
Well, it's probably just like any archaeological dig. Someone's there, they're like, "Wow, look at this shiny piece of glass. What is this? Like, let's dig here." And then they're digging and they find a door, and it's like, wait a second, there's something huge down here.
yeah. And I mean, that's essentially what happened. And it seems like the council of mages that we're familiar with in the game were probably may have been involved as like some sort of leadership in that excavation.
Mm-hmm.
That part is not really touched upon, but we know that Bloke, for instance, is the reason that any of the work that's being done in the facility, like later on, is possible. He funded construction and presumably excavation,
Mm-hmm.
because Ace tells us, like, he was one of the richest guys of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So this group of people excavates. They find, the archives that give them a lot of information that they need. A lot of that information goes missing, but I think
Mm-hmm.
at the time there's some juicy tidbits for them.
Like they were working with incomplete information. Like they had
Yeah.
fragments of what happened, and maybe that's why they don't realize that this is a bad idea. They just get to focus on like there's something down here, and not so much why is this in a gigantic hole in the ground where everything's dead.
Well, yeah. On the other hand, though, they do discover that the people who maintained this like uh, I guess this power
Hmm.
did wipe themselves out. And we know later that this kind of emboldens and like creates a almost like a zealous cult around this power. But at the time, I think that knowing that it wiped out the previous civilization and knowing how they had handled it before, I think this gives them an idea of how careful they need to be with this thing. So yeah, they discover it, they excavate, they also like build the circuitry into the facility. They kind of get the ball rolling again in this
Hmm.
in this facility, and begin using it for their own means. But
Yes.
yeah, they're very carefully approaching the power at this point. They're learning how to best like I guess tease the power out and not go too far with it.
Hmm.
So around this time, and this is probably I don't even know how long after the initial or their initial discovery of it, but they formed a council which is
Hmm.
of each school of magic, and the presumably the de facto leader, the arbiter,
Hmm.
um, ends up being forced to deal with something emerging from the void,
Hmm.
which this brings up another question of like, wait a minute, so how are void creatures just slipping in here? And it seems like the region around the star is kind of unstable because of the power eternal being emitted from it, so it kind of decomposes reality around it.
Hmm.
So I think we can imagine that Chaos God probably emerged down deep in the facility like that.
And Arbiter like sealed it in like the temple, but like in doing so had to like seal the temple and himself away,
Yep.
and thus the council was without its de facto leadership.
Yep. And so now uh, you have this kind of unstable balance in the council.
Hmm.
Sorry, can I ask just a brief question? Because I think some people might have noticed something. When you started at the beginning, you said about the 5 schools of magic,
Ah, yeah.
but in the game, we see 7 of them.
Hmm. Yeah. So it seems like that very first group of mages, they were familiar with 5 schools, and it seems like those schools are native to what we would consider like our plane of existence. And it seems like after they open up the void, we we are able to discover 2 more schools, probably of pertaining to elements of the void
Hmm.
or the abyss.
Hmm.
Um, and the 2 schools that come out of this are enigmancy
Hmm.
and necromancy or abyssal magic.
Hmm.
And abyssal magic is pretty closely connected with power eternal, so it makes sense that we hadn't discovered power eternal yet, so we can't
Hmm.
have a school pertaining to it.
Hmm.
And enigmancy kind of reflects the nature of the void. Anything can come out of the void. Anything can be produced by a mage using this type of magic.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, they discover these 2 more schools, and that's how we have that seven count now.
Okay. So coming back, there's this unstable council.
Yeah. So without Arbiter there, we have Ordinator, who is in charge of the show, and it seems that there's
Really chill
some
guy, right?
really just his element is not reflective of his hot temper at all. um, he So we know that there's a fairly zealous um, kind of like following behind like Power Eternal, this kind of cultish energy. And not everyone is a part of that, but Ordinator kind of like thrives on this in his leadership. Um, he wasn't a bad guy to begin with, and even at the time that things go wrong, I think that I think that what ended up happening is the people turned against him. The thing that allows you to use Power Eternal effectively is souls. And so we can assume that there is some fairly unsavory stuff going on in order to experiment with this energy. And so it seems like either people on the surface or maybe even people in the facility, it seems very likely that both kind of pushed back against its use any further.
Good for them. Good for
Yeah,
them.
no, really.
Yeah, that worked out really
Important.
well for them.
Oh, yeah. So it starts a war against. It seems like it's surface versus facility, but it's not entirely clear how the factions break down.
Oh,
And
maybe
this,
another way to put it is like a war between the true believers of Power
yeah,
Eternal and like the doubters.
yeah. I mean, really, it's those who support the use.
The people who want to feed more souls to the Power Eternal to fuel magic, and the people who have a problem with that.
The people who want to feed more souls to the Power Eternal, the good guys. Yeah. So this war breaks out.
I assume this is where a lot of the bosses that we're familiar with kind of emerge as weapons of war.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of deadly war machines. They've probably been in production to some degree because when you discover a cool power, you don't just sit on it. You try to blow stuff up with it. It seems like they followed that policy as well. Yeah, a war starts and it goes on for years. It seems like because I think we get some indication that it's been quite a long war in the dialogue for the exalted ending. So it seems like by the end of the war, Ordinator is on his back foot, and he's pretty desperate to find a way to claim victory. And so he determines that he's going to create a living god and try and channel Power Eternal into a perfect machine. And when he does this, another member a former member of the council, the Grand Warlock, takes one of the seals that would be necessary to maintain control over that machine, and presumably in hopes of dissuading Ordinator from following through. Ordinator doesn't care. Continues to channel Power Eternal in. Yeah, exactly. Too desperate.
Yeah.
And when the machine awakens, it just causes absolute destruction. And the war is over, but no one has survived. That it is told to us textually that everyone is dead. No one
Obliteration
survived.
count 3.
And this raises some interesting questions because, it brings up the question of like, well, how does everybody get into their mechanical bodies? And maybe some of them are already in those, but there are plenty of people who probably weren't. So are they just the ghosts that litter the surface, or what does that look like? And the answer is that we don't really know. We know that a lot of people end up in machine bodies. Their souls end up in machine bodies. We know that there are souls that float around and they're barely conscious even. I mean, they're not particularly intelligent. They're disorganized, but the world is left in this state of devastation. And beyond that, something else has happened. Not only just devastation of life, but something about the world or the universe is now kind of broken. It seems as if time has stopped. And what exactly this looks like or means is also very mysterious. But Ordinator sort of broke the world, it seems like.
Good job, Ordinator.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
You're just making a bad situation worse, aren't you?
So, like, the world enters this kind of stasis after that.
Yeah, and these souls like move around freely. We see that in game. So it's not as if time is required for
But, like,
motion.
nothing is happening, in a sense.
Yeah, it seems like time may be more connected to memory and living record than actual like physical properties. Although we do have like time stopping stuff too, so who knows?
Thanks,
But
Warden.
we know they've been stripped from the pages of time, and it seems that reflects what's happening to them here. They're no longer a part of the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so now we're back at this sad, desolate facility,
Mm-hmm.
and after some uncertain amount of time, the visitors start to show up,
Mm-hmm.
and we know that there are several that show up, and we don't know what their goal is, and we don't know exactly what they're trying to do. It's assumed that they're seeking power eternal, but what they're planning to do with it is very unclear.
Hmm.
And that's when we meet Overlord and Chaos,
Mm-hmm.
and they seem to be the first pair that make it through to floor 6 as we know it,
Mm-hmm.
which is the floor that is closest to the source of power eternal
Mm-hmm.
and the machine's stomping grounds at this point.
Mm-hmm.
The machine has been, I guess, happily existing down down in the bowels of this facility without much curiosity for the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Probably doesn't smell a whole lot of fresh souls to gobble up or anything.
Just down there playing Fortnite.
Yeah. So Chaos arrives first and manages to damage the machine,
Mm-hmm.
but then takes, probably around like something close to mortal damage. And
Mhm.
Overlord arrives shortly after and continues the fight,
Mhm.
but again, unable to finish it off. So before Overlord gets finished off, Chaos Ship takes the hit for him
Mhm.
and then fuses with the machine.
Mhm.
And after that, Overlord wanders off and fuses with a war mech, which is the Overlord boss that we encounter, and then maintains a position at floor 6. And I believe this is actually in an effort to protect Chaos and their
At
new
floor
inhabitant
5.
form. Oh, floor 5.
He's
Thank you.
protecting the gate to floor 6.
Yeah, the entrance to floor 6.
Protecting their friend, seemingly. Someone they
Yes.
care
Yeah.
about, obviously.
And
Yep.
we can surmise that between visitors 10 and 11 and then visitors 12 and 13, which is now on D13, a
Mhm.
very long time passes because machine goes from doing this fight to being encased in stone by the time Null gets back there.
Yeah, and it's curious how Machine even ended up like that. Is that something that Chaos was able to do with its new body while they still had consciousness? They managed to like encase it somehow, or is this something maybe Bloke did since Bloke is a geomancer after all? It's really uncertain.
It does bear mentioning that despite all of this long time between the war and the visitors, most of the council is still there.
Yeah, Council's hanging out. I mean, it's not the Council anymore, but
Well,
they're
no, they kind of don't talk with each other much these days.
no, it's there's a lot of tension.
Yeah,
I think some of them might not even be able to speak anymore, seemingly.
Yeah, that's fair.
that's true.
Yeah. So now the floor is also sealed up.
Mm-hmm.
There are so we know that Null and D13 come in. Null collects those seals,
Mhm.
and then destroys Overlord. Poor guy can't catch a break.
Specifically destroys the Overlord that Overlord fused with.
Yes, that the
Yeah.
sword ship fused with.
Yeah,
Yep.
and then D13 has to defeat another one of those that came from the production line, but that doesn't have Overlord's soul fused with it.
Yep. There are a few Overlords hanging around. I think. I mean, maybe the suggestion is also that like Overlord or I guess Chaos Ship had to fight the same type of mech or something.
Yep.
That's it's all kind of unclear, but
Mhm.
it's very possible.
Okay.
So then Null goes down, finds the machine, finishes it off,
Mhm.
and then finds the conduit that seems most closely connected to, most directly connected to Power Eternal. And to kind of get into this a little bit, we've talked about the star crashing, we've talked about Power Eternal, but we never really covered that the star itself is a vessel that holds Power Eternal, and we don't know how much. It's a source of they think it's a well of like infinite energy.
Yeah.
And so now we have a conduit that seems to be hooked up right to it.
Mm-hmm.
And Null jumps on in and claims the power eternal.
And that changes them.
And that does. So D13's hot on their tail.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time they catch up, Null is transforming into something different. And Null transforms into the monolith. And we've seen images of this character around the facility, and some symbolic imagery that represents it on other machines. And it's a something that has been prophesized, and now we're seeing the fulfillment of that prophecy.
Yeah, there's literally murals on the walls that are like, it
look
shows,
just like it.
Yeah, it shows mages essentially worshiping the monolith.
Yep. And now and maybe seeing the prophecy and being in fear of it,
Yeah.
So now D13 has to destroy the monolith. And they succeed in doing so, but at the cost of their friend.
After many runs.
After many runs, I had to go back to the
sorry,
hub
I'm talking about my experience.
Yeah, the way that the Malachi cannon played out.
Yeah, it was tough. But
D13
eventually
did some damage, retreated, came back, did a little more, retreated. It's kind of a continual effort. But yeah, and this is where we see presumably Power Eternal leaves the world, is what the prophecy says. What exactly happens at this point is kind of a question mark. We see these red balls come up from the enemies and Null and D13 in the credits, and that seems like a strong indication that the souls are drifting up, free from these machine bodies now, and they're free. They're finally free.
Soul orbs.
So kind of soul orbs, and it's kind of this bittersweet ending, right? Because now the struggle's over. But it doesn't seem like the story really ends there, because as the player continues, we learn that there's a database in the facility. And this is kind of an interesting point. It seems like this whole time that we've been playing the game, we've been running some kind of simulation on a database that contained all of this information about all of these events. And so that now suggests, timeline-wise, that there is a database, there is some sort of computer running that is, who knows where, in the facility somewhere, that is holding all this information, and we, the players, are accessing it. And maybe that's part of the story as well. Someone accesses this thing.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where the timeline ends. And we can get into more details about what the database is and all the other stuff. But I think in terms of timeline material, that's kind of it. There's some little side stories in there too, but
that would be in a sense like the present of the story within the game.
Yeah.
Cool. Because now that you mentioned the database, the obvious question, because it's one of the big features Into Oblivion brought, is, well, that revamped, is loops.
Yeah.
What are loops in this context?
So the player, who we don't know who the player is. The player it might just be you, or it might be someone in the universe of Star of Providence interacting with this simulation. They run through the simulation and they break it in a way using a cartridge that they pick up. Hopefully everyone listening is familiar with Floor 7 and all of this, because it's a bit difficult to explain otherwise.
At this point, it's kind of... Yeah.
It's gotta be.
This is deep lore, and if you haven't played the game,
what are you still doing listening to this?
Yeah, what are you doing? It's actually probably boring.
Yeah.
But the player kind of breaks the simulation a bit. It's supposed to end at floor 6, and they get carried into a new kind of glitched floor because of some sort of like integer. I think it's explicitly called integer overflow.
Yep.
So they overflow into just a garbled mess. And so database seems to be constructed in a pretty responsible way. It doesn't just crash. It has handling involved. And so the player explores this floor that database has constructed. It just seems piecemeal of everything, and with its own little defensive additions, because we find enemies that are more difficult than usual, and then the database itself shows up as a feature of this floor, some sort of like physical representation of it, and it also tries to defend itself from the player, and the reason being is because the more the player messes with this simulation, the more it corrupts this simulation. Um, the achievement decoherence implies that the simulation is being run on a quantum computer. And I'm not really deep into quantum physics or anything, so don't don't expect much from me. But for a quantum computer to continue running well, it needs to have a very controlled environment. And what the player is doing, it seems, is disrupting that environment. And so the more and more the player pushes that system, the more corrupt the simulation becomes, until eventually, in the very end, after loop 13, the player breaks the simulation. They cause a decoherence of the quantum system. And when that happens, a quantum computer can't run at the capacity it needs in order to simulate things at the scale that database was before. And that's why we see the world breaking.
The obvious follow-up question is like, so what is what is the big boss at the end of loop 13?
It is unclear. It seems like it's database's best shot at taking out the player. It is the machine in maybe not like a fully realized power, but I mean, it almost seems like beyond what anyone would have expected it to be. But it's point zero made more perfect than it was before. Maybe with, I mean, we see the 4 seals during the fight, so it's kind of unclear if this is like, well, this is what it would have been like if it had those 4 seals. It's very uncertain because we don't really know what the seals even actually do. But it seems like this is a last-ditch effort to destroy the player, and database's best shot is cranking up the volume to 11
to 13
with shoot, yeah, to 13 with 0.0.
And then
it's protecting itself essentially, right? I mean, it's trying to stop itself or the simulation from being destroyed.
It's like it now realizes that the player, the ship, the visitor is like a threat to be eliminated, and so must now like turn all of its power into like getting rid of this. And if with a little bit of patience and practice, you'll find out, that's still not enough. You still, well, it actually does. It's not clear. You defeat it? Question mark.
You
make it crash.
You cause a crash. It is trying its hardest to blow you up, and in the end, it tries too hard and kind of blows itself up. Maybe.
Yeah, but you are trapped in there.
Yeah, and like you were saying, the player, the player's ship specifically, the visitor, is seen as a void level threat. It's seen as some sort of void entity that needs to be scrubbed off the face of existence. And by the end, it even like updates that classification in loop 13 to something even higher than that, something more dangerous. And we see a similar classification from going over trial 5 suddenly, but Arbiter. Arbiter also mentions that the visitor is, even after Chaos God is gone, the void still lingers. So there's this need for defense against void entities, and the visitor is like even worse than that. It's the worst case of that danger.
Which makes you think that the visitor inside the simulation doesn't really know what they're doing, right? I mean, I don't know. It seems like maybe they stumbled into it and they're just breaking things.
They are an enemy. Like the facility, like the database and number 2 would classify them as enemies, but the visitor doesn't reciprocate that animosity necessarily.
Oh yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I think The visitors do seem to kind of unwittingly be doing things, and the player specifically is very unwittingly attacking the database.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to, play a harder and harder version of the game.
Like, the intentions of the visitors are all speculation because they are the characters in all this that speak the least, and all of the backstory and all of the world building corresponds to like everything Coolant just talk about. But like the player characters, they're still a huge mystery to us.
Yeah, we know that there are characters who care about each other.
Mm-hmm.
Overlord and Chaos seem to, and Null and D13 seem to. But beyond that, we don't really know anything.
Yeah.
I know there's speculation about Null seeking out Power Eternal for their own use.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also very possible that this is just what visitors are made for, is to find Power Eternal, try and contain it in some way. We don't really know.
But then what if that would be their purpose? Then why would D13 destroy Null if that was successful?
Well, because Null was going berserk. That's the question, right? Is like if Null, well, coming back to the idea of these creatures being worse than the Void, level threat, it might be because of that. What we saw Ordinator fail to do with the machine, which is create a perfect machine that had the Power Eternal and also mind. The visitors have mind, and they are capable of taking in Power Eternal, at least in small quantities, without losing themselves. So they are kind of the most powerful machines ever created, at least in terms of conscious machines. So you're able to keep your mind, and when you use those upgrade terminals, you're getting amounts of Power Eternal injected into your machine. This is something mentioned in one of the trial dialogues.
Getting a little bit of juice.
Yeah, and so we know that these visitors are capable of taking on a little bit of the juice and still maintaining their consciousness.
The problem is that Null just went directly to the source and like just drank directly from the hose.
Yeah, exactly. And apparently it still doesn't that's too much even for them. And so so D13 had to shoot it down. So there's, if we assume that they're conscious, then maybe they know what their mission is. It's to get rid of Power Eternal in some way.
Well, just took 12 of them, 12 and 13, to actually realize that mission.
Thanks so much for listening to our Star of Providence fancast. Big thanks as always to Garoslaw and AlexMdle for allowing us to use their music and sound effects in the podcast. You can check out all 3 of the Star of Providence soundtracks on Bandcamp. Much gratitude to Coolant for taking the time to walk us through his research. If you have any comments or suggestions for the show, you can reach out to us on our Discord server. We'll post the server link in the show notes. Thanks for listening. We hope you'll join us for part 2 of our conversation with Coolant. See you there. You did come for the lore, didn't you?